Kara Lewis stood at the entrance of the small, bustling cafe, the smell of freshly ground coffee beans and pastries mixing with the chilly morning air. She pulled her coat tighter around her body, as much for the warmth as for the protection it offered against the outside world. She didn't belong here, or at least she didn't feel like she did. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her leather purse as she scanned the room, spotting the man she'd been avoiding for the past few weeks. The pity in his eyes when he first asked her out still lingered even now, despite the perfectly good cup of coffee between them. They had agreed to meet on the advice of her sister, who said she needed to get back out there after her divorce. Her ex-husband, Ben, had been the one to decide he wanted someone else, leaving her with 2 young kids and a house full of empty promises. Kara hadn't wanted to be the bitter woman, but the truth was, after 6 years of marriage, she felt like a part of her had been discarded when the divorce papers were signed, and her insecurities, well, they seemed to multiply with each passing month. Taking a deep breath, she walked over to the table, where a man with broad shoulders and warm, intelligent eyes sat waiting. His skin was dark, his jaw sharp, and his expression unreadable. Malik Johnson. He seemed calm, like he didn't carry the weight of old baggage with him. He rose to greet her, his smile a little too perfect, almost too kind. "Hey, Kara. Glad you could make it," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "Thanks for understanding," she replied with a thin smile, settling into the chair opposite him. Her gaze momentarily drifted toward the window, where a family of 3 walked by, laughing and holding hands. She bit her lip, her mind heavy with her own swirling doubts. They made small talk about the weather, the city, and his work as a community architect. But Kara couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. It wasn't that Malik wasn't attractive. He was. It wasn't that he wasn't kind. He was that too. But it was the weight of his question that hung between them like an unspoken rule. How would he look at her once he knew her story? "You know," she said suddenly, unable to keep it in any longer, "I've been divorced for 2 years, and I have 2 kids. So, just in case you're thinking about it, no one wants a divorced woman with 2 kids. Malik's expression didn't falter. He leaned back, his gaze steady. "Good. I want a whole story, not a fairy tale." Her breath caught in her throat. Kara blinked, trying to process his response. "Excuse me? I'm not interested in perfect or pretending. I want something real," he said, leaning forward now, his voice low and sincere. "I'm not here to judge. I'm here to listen if you want to share." For the first time in what felt like forever, Kara felt something shift inside her. Something soft, something unexpected. The heavy armor she'd worn for so long felt just a little lighter. The conversation shifted in a way Kara hadn't expected. Malik didn't press her about her past, and yet something about his presence made her feel like she could finally exhale, even if just for a moment. "So, what's it like?" Kara asked, her voice quieter now. "Being a father, I mean. I've seen how much my kids need from me, but I wonder how it's different for you." Malik chuckled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair, his smile a little less guarded now. "It's a wild ride, but you learn quickly that love isn't about perfection. It's about consistency and showing up when it matters, not just when it's convenient." She nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the busy barista behind the counter. "You know, it's funny. I always thought when I got married it would be forever. I thought I had it all figured out." His gaze softened. "I think a lot of people believe that. But love doesn't come with a guarantee. It's messy and complicated, especially when life throws you curveballs." Kara looked at him then, really, looked at him. Deep brown eyes that held a quiet understanding, a man who wasn't afraid to get a little messy in the pursuit of something real. And she wondered, for a split second, if she had been wrong to close herself off from the possibility of a love like that. "I'm sorry," she said, almost involuntarily, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and hope, "for thinking you'd judge me for assuming you wouldn't be okay with my kids and everything. I've just had so many people tell me that I'm not enough, you know? Not enough for love, not enough for someone like you." Malik leaned forward, his gaze never Wavering. Kara, if there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that people's opinions don't define you. You're not here to fit into someone's idea of what they think you should be. You're here to live your own truth. Her heart skipped a beat. She could feel the sincerity in his words, in the way he looked at her as if she was worth all of it, despite the baggage she carried. I've been through a lot, Kara continued, her voice trembling slightly. But I've also built a life that I'm proud of. My kids, my job, they're my world. But it's hard to feel like I'm enough when the world keeps telling me I'm not. Malik reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. You are. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. For the first time in years, Kara felt seen, truly seen. Not as a divorced woman or a mother, but as Kara, the woman behind the labels. Kara's day started with the usual rush. Getting the kids ready for school, checking emails for her freelance graphic design work, and trying to juggle the responsibilities of being both a mother and a professional. Her life had always been like this, a constant balancing act. But today felt different. Her mind kept drifting back to Malik, his words, the ease with which he had listened, without judgment, when she had bared a piece of herself. She hadn't expected it. A part of her had still braced for the familiar discomfort of being pitied. But Malik had done the opposite. He had offered. No sympathy, no poor you. Instead, he'd shared pieces of himself, opening up in a way that made her feel like she could trust him, like she could breathe. By the time she finished her errands, it was early afternoon. She was grabbing coffee at a local cafe when she saw Malik again, standing near the sidewalk, his gaze focused on a stack of architectural blueprints in his hand. He was alone, dressed casually in a fitted maroon jacket, gray jeans, and his signature boots. His hands, always steady and confident, were scribbling notes on the edge of the plans. Something inside her stirred as she approached. She hadn't expected to see him here, in the same neighborhood where she lived and worked. Not like this. Malik looked up just as she was about to pass, his eyes lighting up with recognition. The usual calm, collected nature he exuded was softened by a quiet warmth as he smiled. Kara, he greeted, his voice low but clear. Didn't expect to run into you today. I was just finishing up a design for a community project. Busy as always, huh? Kara said, her lips curling into a half smile. Her eyes lingered on the blueprints, intrigued. Yeah, he chuckled, folding the papers carefully. But it's good work. I love being a part of projects that actually make a difference. She nodded, but a flicker of doubt crossed her face. It must be nice, knowing you're building something that lasts. He seemed to catch the change in her tone, a slight shift that she hadn't meant to show. What do you mean? Malik asked, stepping closer. Kara hesitated. She hadn't expected to share this so quickly, but there was something about his presence that made her feel safe, understood in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. I guess. I feel like I'm always just putting out fires. I'm not really building anything that lasts, just managing things. Sounds exhausting, Malik said, tilting his head slightly, his expression one of genuine concern. It is, she admitted, but it's the way I've had to live. Everything is about keeping it all together. And sometimes, I feel like I'm just keeping the pieces from falling apart. She looked down, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. There was a long silence between them, the weight of her words hanging in the crisp air. Malik took a small step forward, as though to bridge the invisible space between them. But Kara pulled back slightly, unsure if she was ready for the comfort she had. No idea she needed. You don't have to do it all alone, you know, Malik said gently. His words didn't carry the weight of pity. They were just a statement. Truth, even. We all need people to help us build the things that last. She glanced up at him, surprised by the softness in his voice. And it wasn't just his words. It was the way he looked at her, like he didn't see a broken woman or a divorced mother, but a person who was capable of so much more. The realization hit her like a wave. She wasn't just managing. She was surviving, and there was a difference. You make it sound easy, Kara said, her voice filled with quiet awe. Malik shrugged slightly, a half-smile playing at his lips. "It's not easy, but it's worth it." The air between them shifted, an unspoken understanding blooming where there had only been uncertainty. Kara could feel the barriers she'd built around herself slowly lowering, bit by bit, with every conversation they shared. Malik didn't ask for her story, didn't try to fix her life. He simply let her be, which felt more like a gift than anything she had ever received. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," Kara murmured, more to herself than to him. "You don't have to be," Malik replied, his voice steady. "You just have to be real with yourself. Everything else will come with time." They stood there for a moment longer, the world moving around them, yet neither of them seemed in a rush. For the first time in a long while, Kara allowed herself to simply be present, without the need for explanations or perfection. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It was just a simple coffee meetup, a quick break in the middle of a busy day. Yet here they were, standing together at the edge of a park, the smell of wet grass in the air from the afternoon rain, the soft glow of streetlights reflected in the puddles that scattered across the cobblestone path, turning the world into a watercolor painting. Kara had been expecting to meet Malik at the cafe to talk about a community event he was organizing. But as fate would have it, the weather had changed unexpectedly, forcing them to take shelter under the eaves of an old building. Malik stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, yet there was a distance between them that neither of them had addressed. Did you ever think you'd find yourself standing in the rain with a stranger, talking about, well, everything? Kara asked, her voice light but carrying a weight of sincerity she hadn't meant to let slip through. Malik glanced over at her, his dark eyes catching the last remnants of the fading daylight. He shrugged, his jacket collar turned up against the cold. "I wouldn't say stranger, but I didn't think I'd be here either." He gave her a small grin. "But I'm glad I am." Kara felt her heart skip a beat, though she couldn't explain why. It wasn't as if this was some grand moment of revelation. There was no grand gesture or dramatic confession. But the simplicity of it all, standing here with him, felt like a quiet promise. "You don't seem like the type to believe in love at first sight," she said, attempting to joke her way out of the flutter in her chest. Malik's chuckle was soft, easy. "I'm not, but you make me wonder if there's a different kind of love, one that grows instead of instantly exploding." She turned to face him fully now, her expression softening as she looked into his eyes. He wasn't looking at her with pity or expectation, just understanding, as though he could sense the weight she carried with her every day. His gaze was steady, open, as if waiting for her to make the next move. "I'm not looking for some fairy tale," Kara murmured, her voice thick with vulnerability. I'm just not sure I can trust anyone again." Malik took a step closer, his hand instinctively reaching out, but he stopped just short of touching her. His voice dropped to a low, comforting tone. "You don't have to trust me right away. You just have to let yourself be, let yourself feel, without holding back." The sincerity in his voice made her stomach flutter. This wasn't some pickup line or rehearsed charm. This was real. This was the kind of honesty she hadn't allowed herself to seek in years. The rain began to fall more heavily, soaking their clothes, but neither of them made a move to leave. The storm outside was an afterthought. Everything felt quieter now, as though the city had disappeared, leaving just the two of them standing in the rain. Maybe I could try to let myself feel," Kara whispered, meeting his gaze, her breath catching as his hand reached out to touch hers. His fingers were warm, grounding her, pulling her into a connection that felt unspoken but undeniable. Malik smiled, his eyes flickering with something deeper, something both comforting and challenging at the same time. "That's all I'm asking. Just give yourself permission to be open, Kara." The rain had started to pour harder, but neither of them moved. The quiet intimacy of the moment wrapped around them like the soft evening breeze. She had come to meet him to talk about a community event, but somewhere in the space between words, something else had started to bloom, something more real than she'd ever expected to find. For the first time in a long time, Kara allowed herself to lean into the moment, to let the vulnerability of her heart step forward. She wasn't sure where this would go, or how long it would last, but for now, it felt like enough. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains of Kara's apartment, but she didn't feel the warmth. Instead, she was curled up on the couch, the faint hum of the city outside mingling with the thoughts swirling in her head. Malik had left the cafe with a simple promise, a promise that she didn't know how to handle. "I'll be here whenever you're ready." Those words echoed in her mind as she wrapped her arms tighter around herself, the weight of them pressing down like a silent expectation. She wasn't ready. How could she be? She had kids to think about, a life that had been built on the foundation of practicality and survival. Relationships, especially the kind that involved vulnerability, had been ripped apart once before. She didn't have the luxury of diving into something new, especially with someone like Malik. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and Kara's heart skipped when she saw Malik's name on the screen. She hesitated, staring at it for a long moment. It was tempting to pick up, to hear his voice again, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to let herself fall down that road. The road where emotions had the potential to ruin everything. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the phone and quickly unlocked it. But as her fingers hovered over his name, the flood of memories from her divorce and her failed relationships came rushing in. Ben's betrayal, the exhaustion of constantly feeling alone in a partnership, the frustration of navigating her life as a single mother. Kara closed her eyes, squeezing the phone tightly in her hand. She could feel the familiar ache, the one that told her to protect herself, to keep her guard up. But then another thought emerged. What if, just this once, she let it go? What if she allowed herself to trust someone again? Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her train of thought. It was a message from Malik. "I get it. Don't worry about rushing. Just wanted to check in on you. Make sure you're doing okay." Read it twice, a lump forming in her throat. How had he become the voice of calm in her storm? How was he so patient when she herself was so unsure? Kara stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. She had always been the one in control of her life, managing her work, managing the kids, managing her emotions. Malik, with his quiet strength and empathy, was slowly dismantling the walls she had built so carefully around her heart. She couldn't afford to let someone in, but at the same time, she was so tired of pretending like everything was fine. Sitting back down on the couch, she finally replied to Malik's message. "I'm doing okay, just taking things one step at a time." Her fingers hovered over the phone once more. Then she added a short follow-up. "Thank you for being patient." Before she could second-guess herself, she hit send. The phone vibrated a moment later. "You don't need to thank me. I'm here, whenever you're ready. No rush, Kara. Just you." For the first time in what felt like forever, Kara let herself smile. But it was bittersweet. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let herself be open to whatever was growing between them. But the walls she'd built were hard to tear down. She stood again, looking out the window, watching the busy street below, her thoughts racing. She wasn't sure if she could ever fully trust again, but Malik made her wonder if there was another way, a way to live without the heavy weight of fear dictating every decision. She wasn't sure when it would happen, but slowly, something inside her started to shift. The walls weren't gone, but they were starting to crumble. The community center was quieter than usual, with only a few people milling about preparing for the charity event that Malik had been organizing for weeks. Kara had agreed to help set up, partly out of curiosity, but also because she was beginning to see Malik in a way she hadn't before. She had known him to be kind, patient, and reliable, but today, something felt different. There was a sense of calm about him that seemed to transcend his usual laid-back nature. He wasn't just organizing the event, he was actively involved in every detail, from setting up tables to coordinating volunteers. Kara watched him from across the room, his focus intense as he adjusted a banner that read, "Building Bridges for Tomorrow." He wore a simple gray hoodie, dark jeans, and worn sneakers, the casual attire a stark contrast to the formal setting of the event. Despite the bustling surroundings, Malik moved through it all with a quiet authority that drew people to him. He spoke with volunteers, offering encouragement and advice, his tone firm yet understanding. His movements were purposeful. Every task he took on seemed important, but it wasn't just about getting things done. It was about making sure people were seen, valued, and heard. Kara found herself standing by the refreshments table, setting up cups, but her mind was far from the task at hand. She couldn't take her eyes off Malik, not just because of his physical presence, though he certainly had a magnetic energy, but because of the way he moved through the room with such ease and grace. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply giving his all to something he truly cared about. At that moment, one of the younger volunteers, a girl no older than 16, approached Kara with a nervous look on her face. "Excuse me, Ms. Lewis," she began, "but Malik asked me to make sure the dessert table is ready for the auction. Can you help?" Kara nodded, distractedly agreeing. Of course. She followed the girl to the back of the room where the dessert table was being set up. As they walked past Malik, he glanced up, his eyes catching Kara's. He gave her a smile, one that felt different today, softer, more vulnerable. The intensity of the connection she felt in that moment made her heart flutter. It wasn't just a smile of acknowledgement. It was a smile that said, "You matter to me." After setting up the table, Kara lingered, unsure of what to do next. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something new and unfamiliar, something that scared her, but also made her feel more alive than she had in a long time. When the room began to quiet down in preparation for the event, Malik approached, her wiping his hands on his jeans. "Everything set up here?" he asked. "Yeah, I think so," Kara said, glancing at the dessert table. "Everything looks great." Malik took a step closer, his gaze steady. "Thanks for helping out. I know this event wouldn't have come together without your support." Kara paused, her heart skipping a beat at the sincerity in his voice. "You didn't have to thank me, Malik," she said softly. "I'm just doing my part. You don't get it, do you?" Malik said, his voice quieter now. "I see you, Kara. I see everything you've been carrying, and you're still here. You're showing up. That means more to me than you know." His words hit her harder than she expected. She felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at him, unsure of how to respond. For so long, she had kept people at arm's length, afraid of letting anyone see the cracks in her carefully constructed facade. But Malik, he wasn't looking at her with pity or expectation. He was looking at her with understanding, as if he could see the pieces of her life that she'd hidden away. "Malik," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to let someone in again. I've been so scared of getting hurt." He stepped a little closer, his hand brushing against hers in a gesture that was both comforting and intimate. "You don't have to let me in all at once, Kara. I'm not asking for all of you right now. I'm just asking for a chance to show you that I'm not going anywhere." Kara looked at his hand, warm, steady, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the pull to let herself believe him. Her chest tightened, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the promise of something real, something that maybe she could finally allow herself to trust. The evening air was heavy with the scent of fresh rain as Kara sat at the dinner table with her parents, the soft clink of silverware and quiet murmurs surrounding her. She had managed to avoid discussing Malik for weeks, but tonight, the inevitable had come. Her mother, Margaret Lewis, had never been shy about her opinions. The woman had built her life around the idea of status, appearances, and what was expected. Kara had always known that one day she'd have to face the uncomfortable reality that her mother wouldn't approve of Malik. But she wasn't prepared for how it would make her feel, how much it would hurt to see her mother's disapproval reflected in her father's silence. "So, how's work going, sweetie?" her mother asked, her voice soft but laced with an underlying tension. "Everything going smoothly with your freelance projects?" Kara nodded, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah, it's been steady. Some exciting new opportunities coming up." Her mother smiled thinly, then her eyes flickered to Kara's plate, her gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. I hear there's been some community event you've been helping with lately. Malik Johnson's name came up at the country club yesterday. Is he still involved with you? Kara's fork paused mid-air. She felt her stomach tighten, but she forced a smile. Yes, I've been helping him. He's working on a project that's actually really important to the neighborhood. Margaret's lips thinned as her fork clinked against her plate. You know, Kara, I've heard rumors, not just about him, but about the company he keeps. It's a bit beneath you, don't you think? Kara's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly what her mother was implying. He's not good enough for you. Her father, Richard Lewis, a tall man with gray hair and a stern demeanor, set his glass down with a quiet thud, his eyes meeting Kara's across the table. Kara, you know we've always supported your independence, but you have to understand, love. It isn't always about what feels good in the moment. It's about stability, your future, your children's future. Kara swallowed hard. You don't know him, Dad. And it's not like that. It's always like that, her mother interjected sharply. You're not just thinking about yourself anymore, Kara. You have 2 children to raise, and you can't keep making choices based on whatever this is. Her voice dipped lower, eyes narrowing. This man, this Malik, he's a distraction. He can't offer you anything more than a temporary comfort. Kara stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She could feel the walls closing in, the weight of their judgment pressing down on her chest. She had fought so hard to stand on her own terms, her own decisions. But now, in the face of her family's expectations, she wasn't sure she could keep pushing against the tide. I don't need your approval, she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. I don't need you to approve of my choices, my friends, or my life. I've made my own mistakes, and I've learned from them. Her father's voice softened, but his words cut deeply. We're just worried, Kara. We don't want to see you hurt again. Kara bit her lip, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She felt small in that moment, smaller than she ever had before. But then, as the hurt started to bubble up, another voice echoed in her mind. Malik's words. You don't have to do it all alone, you know. He had been right. She didn't have to do this alone. She didn't have to carry the burden of other people's expectations. And, more importantly, she didn't have to apologize for what she was beginning to feel for him. I'm not alone, Kara said quietly, her voice steadying. And I'm not going to apologize for who I choose to care about. Her mother's face flushed with frustration, but Kara didn't back down. She had made up her mind. This was her life, her story, not anyone else's. That evening, as Kara walked back to her car, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Malik. You okay? Kara looked up at the dark sky, the cool night air brushing against her skin. She let out a breath, finally releasing the tension she had been holding in for hours. She typed back, I am now. Thanks for being patient with me. Her fingers lingered on the screen before she hit send, but deep down, she knew it wasn't just Malik's patience that was helping her. It was his presence, his unwavering support. She had been scared of the unknown, of what the future might hold, but now she wasn't sure she could imagine a future without him in it. She started the engine of her car, a sense of clarity washing over her. The road ahead might be difficult, but it was one she was ready to walk, if Malik would walk it with her. The evening was calm, unusually still for a Friday night in the city. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the cool air had a slight bite to it as Kara walked toward Malik's apartment building. She hadn't meant to come here tonight, but something about the tension from earlier in the day, her family's disapproval, her own doubts, made her want to talk. And there was only one person who seemed to understand, who was always patient, who hadn't once pressured her. As she reached the entrance, the door swung open before she could knock. Malik stood there, dressed casually in a dark green hoodie and worn jeans, his expression soft but curious as he saw her standing there. Kara, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. I wasn't expecting you tonight. Everything okay? She hesitated for a moment, her heart still heavy from the earlier confrontation with her family. She had been holding it all in, trying to convince herself that she was okay, that she could handle it. But now, in front of Malik, she couldn't hide it anymore. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Malik stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. "Of course. Come on in." The apartment was small, but cozy, warm. Tones of wood and exposed brick, the kind of space that made you feel at home the moment you walked in. Malik led her to the couch, where they sat side by side, the silence between them a comfortable one, yet charged with the emotions that neither of them had yet fully expressed. "I don't know what to do," Kara admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough for this. For you. For all of it." Malik's gaze softened, and he turned slightly toward her, his body angled so that he could give her his full attention. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Kara. I'm not expecting you to have all the answers, and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." She bit her lip, the words he'd said earlier in the week ringing in her ears. You don't have to do it all alone. But her mind still battled with the fear of being judged, of not measuring up. "I'm scared," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared that I'm not enough, that I'll mess this up, that I'll let you down the way I let myself down before." Malik's expression shifted, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that took her breath away. He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle, as though he were grounding her. "You're enough, Kara," he said, his voice steady, filled with conviction. "I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to have it all figured out. All I need is you, the real you." Tears welled up in Kara's eyes, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back. She had been so scared for so long, holding her emotions at bay, refusing to let anyone close enough to see her flaws. But Malik's words, his presence, made her feel something she hadn't felt in ages. Acceptance. "I've been so afraid to trust anyone again," Kara confessed, her voice trembling. "After my divorce, I built these walls around myself, thinking that if I didn't let anyone in, I wouldn't get hurt. But now I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions. My head tells me to protect myself, but my heart—" She paused, her gaze dropping to their joined hands. "My heart tells me to take a chance, to let you in." Malik gently lifted her chin, bringing her gaze back to his. "I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between protecting yourself and trusting me. Trust isn't something I'm asking for right away, Kara. I'm not here to rush you or force anything. I'm here, ready when you are." Kara's breath caught as she looked into his eyes. In that moment, she saw something in him she hadn't expected. Patience, understanding, and a strength that didn't come from pretending to have it all together, but from accepting the messy, complicated parts of life. "You're not afraid of me?" she said softly, as if the realization had just struck her. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling with tenderness. "I'm not afraid of what's real, and I think you're real, Kara." She let out a shaky breath, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of his words. The walls she'd spent so long building, layer by layer, began to crack, piece by piece. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she was willing to let herself believe that it could be something beautiful. "Maybe I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible but full of resolve. "Maybe I can trust you. Maybe I can trust myself." Malik nodded slowly, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles. "No rush, but when you're ready, I'll be here. No pressure." And for the first time in years, Kara allowed herself to believe him. The storm had come out of nowhere. One minute, the sky was a brilliant blue, the sun shining down on the busy streets of downtown, and the next, dark clouds rolled in, heavy with rain. Kara had just finished picking up the kids from school when the first drops began to fall, quickly, turning into a torrential downpour. She sat in her car, the wipers swishing furiously as she navigated the flooded streets. Her mind was spinning with everything that had been happening over the past few weeks. Her conversations with Malik, those moments of connection, had made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But hope was a dangerous thing when you didn't know if it would last. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from her mother, Margaret. Kara hesitated for a moment before unlocking the screen. I spoke with Richard today. He's very concerned, Kara. We both are. This Malik, he's not who we thought he was. I hope you're not seriously thinking of continuing this relationship. Kara felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The words echoed with the same judgment her mother had voiced since the beginning. She had known this conversation was coming. It was only a matter of time before her family would express their concern again. But the weight of it now felt different. Malik had come into her life at a time when she needed him the most, and despite all her reservations, he had shown her what it meant to truly care. No pretense, no hidden agenda. Yet here she was, facing the reality that her family would never see him the way she did. With a deep sigh, she tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pressed the accelerator, trying to push away the suffocating pressure building inside her. She had promised herself that she wouldn't let anyone dictate her life, but the truth was, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to fight them anymore. Kara pulled into her apartment complex, the rain still coming down in sheets. She grabbed her purse and rushed to the front door, the weight of the storm and her emotions weighing her down. She needed a moment to think, to breathe. She needed to talk to Malik. The phone rang several times before Malik picked up. His voice was warm, familiar, but she could hear the hint of concern in his tone. "Hey, Kara, you okay? I was starting to worry." "I'm fine," she said, her voice tight. "It's just my mom, Malik. She's so against this. She doesn't understand why I'm spending time with you, and it's starting to wear on me." There was a pause on the other end. Then Malik's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Kara. I know it's tough. You don't deserve to feel caught in the middle." She sank down onto the couch, her fingers gripping the phone as she tried to steady herself. "It's just so much. My kids, my family, my past. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can keep fighting for us when everyone else is pushing so hard against it." Malik's response was quiet, but firm. "Kara, you don't have to fight alone. I'm not going anywhere, but I can't make this decision for you. You have to decide what's best for you, for your family, for your future." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. She had spent so much of her life trying to meet others' expectations, trying to fit into their version of who she should be. But now, faced with the reality of a future that wasn't neatly packaged or easily understood by the people she loved, she felt lost. "Maybe I'm not ready to fight," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Maybe I'm just too scared to let anyone else in again." Malik sighed softly. "It's okay to be scared, Kara. I can't promise it will be easy. But if you let me, I'll fight with you." Her heart ached at his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that they could be something real. But she wasn't sure she was strong enough to carry the weight of it. "I don't know if I can ask for that from you," Kara said, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I'm worth it." "You are," Malik said, his voice steady, unwavering. "You are, Kara. I've seen who you are, and that's enough for me." Kara stayed silent for a moment, the rain pounding against her window like an unrelenting drum. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring or what the future held. But as she sat there in the darkness, feeling the pull of Malik's words and the weight of her own doubts, one thing was clear: she couldn't do this alone. The morning sun peeked through the blinds, casting soft beams across Kara's apartment. She had barely slept the night before, her mind a storm of confusion, doubts, and fears. The weight of her family's disapproval still hung heavily around her shoulders, but the conversation with Malik, his words, his patience, his quiet faith in her, had stayed with her all night. He had made it clear that he wasn't asking her to choose him over everything else. He wasn't asking for her to give up her responsibilities or her past. He was simply asking her to take a chance on something real, something that didn't come with a set of expectations or a perfect future. But could she really do that? Kara stood in front of the mirror, running her fingers through her hair. She had spent so much of her life trying to be what everyone else expected her to be, trying to fit into the roles that had been assigned to her. Wife, mother, daughter. But today, Standing in her own apartment, in her own life, she realized that none of those roles could define her. She was more than just the sum of her relationships and responsibilities. She was Kara, and for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to see herself for who she truly was. The knock on the door made her heart skip a beat. She knew it was Malik before she even opened it. She took a deep breath, pulling the door, open to find him standing there, looking as calm and steady as always. His dark brown eyes softened when he saw her, and he smiled, a small, reassuring smile that made the room feel warmer. "Hey," he said, his voice low and warm, like he'd been waiting for this moment too. "You ready to talk?" Kara swallowed. Hard, her throat suddenly dry. "Yeah, I think I am." Malik stepped inside, and for a brief moment the world outside her apartment felt distant. The noise of the city, the weight of her family's opinions, all of it faded as he closed the door behind him. He looked at her with such sincerity that Kara felt a rush of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope, tenderness, fear, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. They stood there for a moment, neither of them speaking. But it didn't matter. There was no need for words in that moment. Their silence said everything, an unspoken understanding that they both knew what was at stake here. "Malik," Kara finally said, breaking the silence, her voice steady but unsure. "I've been so afraid of letting someone in, afraid of failing again. But the thing is, I've been failing this whole time. I've been holding on to so many things that don't serve me, and in doing that, I've been keeping myself from the one thing that might actually be good for me." Malik stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "What's that?" Kara met his gaze, and for the first time, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a feeling of relief as the truth poured out of her. "You, us. I'm scared, Malik, but I don't want to be anymore. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing what we could be together, even if it's not perfect, even if it's messy. I want to see where this goes." The words hung in the air between them, each syllable a quiet declaration of the vulnerability she had spent so long avoiding. But with each word, a sense of peace settled over her, like she was finally allowing herself to be the woman she was meant to be. Malik's smile widened, his eyes glistening with something between relief and joy. "You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be anything but yourself." He reached for her hand, gently pulling her toward him, his touch warm and familiar. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Kara didn't hesitate. She let herself fall into the moment, into him. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm she had come to trust over the past few weeks. The doubts, the fears, the judgment, all of it faded into the background. There was no more confusion, no more fighting against her own heart. She had made her choice. "I'm ready," Kara whispered, her voice muffled against his chest. "I'm ready to stop fighting it. I'm ready to build something real." Malik's arms tightened around her, pulling her in closer as he whispered back, "Then let's do it. Together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new beginnings. Kara and Malik spent more time together than ever, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Still, the judgment from her family weighed heavily on her, especially when her mother reached out with another set of expectations she had no intention of meeting. Kara had ignored the texts for days, but today, as she sat in her living room sipping a cup of coffee, she finally opened her phone. A message from her mother blinked on the screen. "I hope you realize how much you're risking. This man is not who we had in mind for you, Kara. You can't just ignore what's best for your future." Her stomach turned, but this time she didn't feel the same old sense of guilt that had always accompanied her mother's words. She was different now. She had changed. The decision had already been made in her heart. With a deep breath, she replied, "I know you're concerned, but I'm doing this for me and for my kids. I won't apologize for it." Setting the phone down, Kara wiped her palms on her jeans and let out a long breath. The weight of her mother's disapproval still stung, but the truth was, She couldn't let her family's fears dictate her happiness anymore. Across town, Malik was standing at the community center, coordinating the final stages of his latest project, a new initiative that would provide mentorship for local at-risk youth. He'd been working tirelessly on it, the long hours a reflection of his dedication to his community and his future. But despite all the success, something had been nagging at him. Kara had always been his anchor, her quiet strength and raw honesty, giving him the courage to push through any obstacle. But this, the judgment from both their worlds, this was something he couldn't control. When he stepped outside to take a breather, the cool evening air brushed against his face. He saw Kara walking toward him, her eyes locked on his. She looked both determined and weary, like she'd been carrying something heavy, and like she was ready to set it down. "Kara," he said, his voice warm but full of concern as he took a step forward. She smiled at him, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time all day. "Hey," she replied softly. "I needed to see you." Malik raised an eyebrow, sensing the weight of her words. "What's going on?" Kara took a deep breath, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. "It's my mom. She's still not okay with us. And honestly, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, keeping her happy while trying to find my own happiness." Malik nodded, stepping closer to her, offering his silent support. "You don't have to keep up any appearances for anyone, Kara. I know it's tough, but you're not in this alone." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and pain. "I don't want to lose you, Malik, but I feel like I'm losing myself trying to please them." Malik reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "You're not losing yourself, Kara. You're finding who you really are. And I'm here for that. I'm here for you, no matter what." Kara's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just empty reassurance. This was real. He was willing to stand by her through everything, her family's expectations, her past mistakes, her fears. Malik wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for her, the whole, messy, beautiful person that she was. "You're right," she said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I've been trying to make everyone else happy, and I forgot that I'm the one who has to live with my choices. So I'm choosing you, Malik. I'm choosing us." Malik's smile widened, and for the first time, Kara saw the depth of his commitment reflected in his eyes. "And I'm choosing you, Kara. Always." They stood there in the fading light, hand in hand, feeling the weight of everything that had led them here, every doubt, every judgment, every moment of fear. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the love they had found, and the strength they had in each other. Together, they were unstoppable. The morning sun bathed the city in soft golden light, casting long shadows over the streets as Kara walked hand in hand with Malik through the bustling park near her apartment. The air was crisp, the scent of fresh grass mixing with the faint aroma of street food vendors setting up for the weekend. Children ran past, their laughter carrying through the air, and the world around them felt alive with possibility. For the first time in a long while, Kara felt that same sense of possibility. She had spent so many years focused on what was expected of her, carrying the weight of her past mistakes and her family's judgment. But now, with Malik by her side, things felt different. She wasn't living for anyone else's approval anymore. She was living for herself, for them, together. "Are you sure about this?" Malik asked, his voice low but filled with the same hope she felt swelling in her chest. They had made plans to meet her kids at the park, an important step in their journey, one that came with its own set of nerves. The idea of her two worlds coming together was both exciting and intimidating. Kara looked up at him, her heart racing as she nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure. I know this isn't going to be easy, but I want them to see the real us, not just what everyone else thinks we should be." Malik smiled at her, the corners of his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "That's all I've ever wanted too, for you to be you." They found a spot near the playground where the kids were playing, and Kara's heart softened when she saw her son, Elijah, climbing up the jungle gym, his face alight with the joy of the moment. Her daughter, Mia, was spinning in circles, giggling as she spun herself dizzy. When they approached, Elijah spotted them first and ran toward them, his legs pumping with excitement. "Mom! Malik! Look! I climbed all the way to the top!" He beamed, his pride radiating from him. Kara couldn't help but smile, her heart swelling as she crouched down to meet him. "I see that. You're getting so strong." Malik bent down beside her, his expression softening as he met Elijah's gaze. "That's impressive, buddy. I don't think I could climb that high." Elijah giggled. "You could try. You just need to be strong like me." Malik's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Well, maybe I'll take you up on that challenge one day." Mia came running over, her curly hair bouncing as she grinned up at them. "Mom, Malik, do you want to play with me? I can show you how fast I can run." Kara exchanged a look with Malik, who raised an eyebrow but smiled. "I think we could use a good race." "What do you say, Kara?" Kara laughed, a genuine, free sound that she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. "You're on." As they ran after Mia and Elijah, laughing and shouting, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by something brighter, more real. Kara had been so afraid of losing control, of letting her heart be vulnerable again. But in this moment, surrounded by her children, with Malik by her side, she realized that love wasn't about having it all figured out. It wasn't about perfection or fitting into society's expectations. It was about the people you choose to walk with, those who truly see you, who love you for who you are, not what they want you to be. When the race ended with an exaggerated, dramatic collapse in the grass, everyone laughing and catching their breath, Malik looked at Kara with a softness that spoke volumes. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice quiet but sincere. Kara smiled, her chest full of warmth. "I am. I really am." He reached out, tucking a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. "Then I'm happy too." In the distance, a family passed by, and Kara noticed the way they looked at them. 2 parents, 2 children, united by love and nothing else. There were no labels or judgments now, just the quiet understanding that they had created something real, something worth fighting for. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Kara stood holding Malik's hand, watching her children play, and for the first time, she didn't feel the weight of the past. She only felt the promise of the future, a future she would walk through with Malik by her side, no longer afraid of what others might think. She had chosen love, and it was enough.